Alright, so I was out of town over the weekend, so I unfortunately didn't get to cover this story immediately when it happened, but I had to do a video on it because we just witnessed an absolutely gigantic earthquake in the American labor movement. So I'm sure most of you guys have already heard about this, but over the weekend on April 1st, Amazon workers officially got their first union here in the United States. So we've been talking about this for months now with multiple different unionization efforts, like the one down in Bessemer, Alabama, that unfortunately failed under the weight of a gigantic, absurd, and illegal anti-union effort by Amazon corporate. And so this is something we've been talking about for a long time for pretty obvious reasons, right? We're talking about Amazon, which is not only one of the biggest corporations in the United States, but one of the largest and most influential and dominant capitalist enterprises in the entire world. So having workers be able to take on this giant and do it in the way that they did with an independent labor union, not even using some of the like RWDSU or larger branch unions for help, doing this in an independent way and taking on one of the largest and most powerful corporations in the entire world. It's just a huge, like, amazing David and Goliath story here. So this was a vote breakdown, roughly 2,600 in favor of the union and roughly 2,100 against the union. So you might see that vote tally and be like, wow, it was only, barely above, seems like 50% that were in favor of the union. But what you got to recognize here, and I'm going to show you a video that kind of breaks this down a little bit, but what you got to recognize here is there was a literal multi-million-dollar anti-union effort that was put forward by Amazon. They brought in, lawyers, they brought in anti-union consultants, and conducted a massive campaign of anti-union propaganda against their workers who were trying to organize. They literally arrested some workers and organizers who were on the site trying to rally for the union. So they pulled out every single stop that they possibly could, getting right up until, if not crossing that line of legality in their anti-union, union-busting tactics, essentially. But that's the reason why you have this close of a vote, even with, the obvious benefits that would come from having union representation, okay? So that's why it seems like it's, a lot closer than it maybe should have been. Now, I wanted to play you guys a clip of them celebrating because why the fuck not? This is absolutely amazing, and we'd love to see it. So here's a video of Chris Smalls and a bunch of other workers and organizers who were pushing to get this union accomplished here. So let's go ahead and watch them. All right, so listen, I mean, they're lit, okay? This is amazing. We love to see it. Fantastic job to all of the organizers and the workers who put themselves out there to make this happen. Now, one of the primary people who you've been probably seeing in the wake of all of this news is this guy right here, Chris Smalls. So this was a previous Amazon warehouse employee who was fired back in March of 2020 for trying to stage a walkout to protest against Amazon's completely absurd lack of safety protocols or lack of safety measures for workers during the beginning of the pandemic, and he staged this walkout and he got fired for it. And so he turned around and flipped up two gigantic middle fingers to Amazon corporate and proceeded to try to form this independent union that was, again, not operating under any of these larger branch unions like the RWDSU, and successfully accomplished this. So again, completely insane that we have a situation where a former Amazon employee who was literally fired for trying to organize the workplace then turns around and successfully leads this campaign to organize the first Amazon union here in the United States. So again, massive David and Goliath story, and we love to see it. So I want to play you this short couple minutes here from this Amazon video that they put together in terms of the beginning stages of this and how this all unfolded and some of the tactics that Amazon was using to try to crush this effort. So let's go ahead and watch the beginning of this video.
Amazon's JFK 8 warehouse on Staten Island employs over 8,000 workers. In late March, workers there voted on whether or not to form a union. The workers' demands include higher wages, longer break times, and safer work conditions.
We want people to have $30 an hour. We want people to have better break times and eating periods.
Data published by the New York Times, OSHA, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics show the warehouse has an extremely high worker turnover rate and an injury rate 3 times higher than the national average.
When you look at the pointless, avoidable deaths that happened during the pandemic, there are people who the outcome of this election is life or death.
But Amazon went to great lengths to ensure a no vote. Amazon plastered the inside of the warehouse with anti-union posters, and workers accused management of removing union material from break rooms.
Sorry, I was just wondering what you have right here.
It is illegal to take down union literature when it's in a break room.
2 founding members of the union, fired by Amazon in 2020 under questionable circumstances, were unable to vote. Chris Smalls.
Last year I was fired, wrongfully terminated for holding a protest.
And Gerald Bryson.
You see the paperwork now. We know what they said, so why am I jobless?
It's not just, is the ALU going to be able to survive for another election if this one is illegally messed with by Amazon? But what's going to happen if the federal enforcement agency is unable to actually enforce federal law under the National Labor Relations Act? What rights is anyone going to have?
Okay, so I think that was a really important point about what he was saying there, is because, you see all of these anti-union efforts where, like, for this example, she was literally removing union literature from a break room, which is illegal. That's straight up illegal. But the problem here is that we have an NLRB that over the last number of decades has been gutted and disempowered. And so you have a situation where these corporations are just doing a simple calculus and saying, well, it might be illegal to use X, Y, and Z anti-union busting tactics, but it doesn't even matter if there's only going to be like a small fine for breaking the law, or worst case scenario, you have to do a redo of the election, which is what we saw in Bessemer, Alabama. And so it's like they're fine to use all of these illegal union busting tactics as long as they recognize or believe that the calculus for them is still going to be financially beneficial, instead of having to deal with a union that is actually going to fight on behalf of the workers to get the things that they were talking about at the beginning of the video, the $30 an hour pay, and just literally having the ability to go and use the bathroom so you don't have to piss in bottles and shit in bags while you're on the job, and taking basic COVID safety measures during a pandemic where coworkers are in many cases literally within Amazon warehouses dropping dead. So pretty basic demands. You would think that a trillion-dollar corporation like Amazon wouldn't have much trouble meeting those demands, but this is exactly why you need union representation, is because these corporations exist for one purpose. They exist to extract as much surplus value from their workers as they physically can get away with, as they legally can get away with, and return excess profits to their shareholders, their executives, their CEOs, etc. That is their only purpose. So it's literally a direct incentive for them to have less COVID safety protocols, to gut the benefits and gut the pay of their workers. That is to their benefit. That is to the benefit of their shareholders. And so of course that's why you need a union to counterbalance that incentive, essentially. But they really did go all out here. Okay, so just as a comparison, the union, the Amazon labor union, spent roughly $120,000 overall, raised through GoFundMe, according to Mr. Smalls, which is this worker here that we just watched. And he said, "We started this with nothing, with 2 tables, 2 chairs, and a tent. Amazon spent more than $4.3 million just on anti-union consultants nationwide." So again, they're pulling out all of the stops. That's just $4.3 million on anti-union consultants. Okay, so not even including the the anti-union messaging and the campaigning and the PR and the propaganda, etc. That's just a tiny fraction of what they're actually spending. But you can see again the David and Goliath characteristics of this this movement here, with literally 2 fired Amazon employees setting up shop with a tent and a couple chairs, and basically just doing like perfect grassroots organizing in order to educate workers and to try to get them to come on board with this movement. And they were obviously successful in doing that. Now, another piece of the backstory here that makes it even more, sweet of an ending, is that Amazon and their PR team and their executives were literally talking about Chris Smalls as if he was just some inarticulate, dumb guy who they should make the face of this unionizing effort in order to try to stall it, I guess, or in order to try to tank the possibility of it actually being followed through on. So a little bit of details on this. It's just, absolutely insane that they would use this type of rhetoric, but also I think it galvanized workers in favor of the union and in defense of Chris Smalls. So here from The Guardian from 2 years ago in April of 2020, again, roughly when they got fired, they say Amazon execs labeled fired worker not smart or articulate in leaked PR notes. So they say Amazon's executives denigrated a fired warehouse worker as not smart or articulate in a meeting with Jeff Bezos, according to a leaked memo obtained by Vice News. And they say Chris Smalls, who had worked for Amazon for 5 years, was fired shortly after he helped organize a work stoppage at the company's warehouse on Staten Island, New York, in protest over a a lack of competitive gear or protective gear and hazard pay for employees, and Amazon claims it fired Smalls for violating social distancing guidelines and putting the safety of others at risk. Again, just completely arbitrary and bullshit justifications that they gave in order to try to fire somebody who was leading a unionization effort, or leading, in this case, a work stoppage, in order to just get, again, the very fucking bare minimum. Okay, they're talking about just getting hazard pay for employees who are facing, and remember, this is before we had vaccines or anything like that, facing literally the prospect of a life and death situation, going to work at an Amazon warehouse. Okay, so minimum that you could do is provide the bare necessities for COVID safety protocols, and also maybe give them a little bit of hazard pay as your CEO is jetting off in his dildo rocket to space. So completely ridiculous that they couldn't even meet these standards, but they ended up firing him. And then Amazon's general counsel, this guy named David Zapolsky, in notes from a meeting of top executives obtained by Vice, wrote, "He's not smart or articulate, and to the extent the press wants to focus on us versus him, we will be in a much stronger PR position than simply explaining for the umpteenth time how we're trying to protect workers." So again, he's literally saying we should try to push for Chris Smalls to be the face of this unionization effort because he's not smart or articulate. Okay, first of all, that's absolutely false. If you've watched any interviews with Chris Smalls, the dude knows what the fuck he's talking about. He is smart and he is articulate, so it's not even correct. But also on top of that, clearly you see the animosity here from this PR team, and sprinkle in a little bit of racism here by assuming that this guy is not going to be able to form some sort of a collective organization effort simply because of the way that you think he appears, or you don't like the way that he talks, basically. So again, it makes it even that much better that he came back and slapped them across the face in this entire organization process, because they were literally bragging behind the scenes about how this guy could never stand a chance against them. And now we have him going on all of these major news outlets in the wake of this successful unionizing effort, and pointing out that the revolution is here. So let's go ahead and listen to what he had to say in this clip.
Twice. Well, they don't have no choice. The revolution is here. That's what we just witnessed on Friday. We're going to organize buildings all across the nation. We in the last 72 hours, we've been contacted from workers all over the world. So they want to unionize. We're going to absolutely help them. We're going to get it done here in New York first. We have another election coming up in 3 weeks, so we're right back at the campaign, on the campaign trail. And once we're finished here in New York, we're going to spread just like the Starbucks movement is spreading across the nation.
So listen, I mean, that is the best case scenario you could possibly ask for. And like he just pointed out there at the end, this is kind of a tendency that we saw with the Starbucks unionization effort, is once you get over that hurdle of that first successful unionization effort, then it could spread like wildfire across the entire country. And that's exactly what he's pointing out there. I mean, he said that he's gotten calls from, places all over in every corner of the United States, as well as in places like India and South Africa. So this is a globally recognized titanic, shift that we are seeing right now in the American and the international labor movement, again, because you're talking about a corporation that is led by the number one or number two, depending on which day you check, richest man on the planet in Jeff Bezos, and also one of the largest and most powerful global corporations in the world. So again, you see the the David and Goliath nature of all of this. Now, those are going to be his next steps, right? On the on the further organizational capacity side of it, he is going to be trying to spread this independent Amazon labor union across the country and begin to organize other facilities that some of them are even beginning these processes right now, but hopefully it does spread like wildfire. Now, another piece of this that we have to recognize is that, yes, it's fantastic that they won this union, but that's not the end of the fight, because now they're going to have to engage in contract negotiations where corporations are absolutely never going to be acting in good faith and are going to actively try to stall and to sabotage this process as long as they possibly can. So let's go ahead and read a little bit about what is to come on that front. So here from Jake Johnson on Common Dreams. He says, Amazon union slams any attempt to delay our hard-won right to bargain collectively. So he says, in the wake of its historic victory in the election to unionize Amazon's JFK 8 warehouse in Staten Island, the Amazon labor union demanded over the weekend that the company begin collective bargaining negotiations in early May and immediately halt any changes to employment policies in the meantime. And they say Amazon has until April 8th to formally submit any objections to the election results, which it seems like they're going to do. A step this the company signaled that it may take shortly following the news of the union's victory on Friday, the first ever vote in favor of a unionizing an Amazon warehouse in the United States, and one of the biggest wins for the labor movement in decades. So they are going to be challenging a lot of these votes. Again, they don't really have any basis for any of this, and so this is purely a process of them trying to play this out and to draw it out as long as possible. It has nothing to do with the merits of the vote at all. They're just basically doing a Donald Trump, stop the count type of situation here. But they continue saying the company, which waged an aggressive union busting campaign in the lead up to the election, said it is evaluating our options, including filing objections based on the inappropriate and undue influence by the National Labor Relations Board. What the fuck does that even mean? The NLRB is literally the entity that is supposed to be facilitating this election. So if you're going to accuse them of what? Undue influence? What the fuck does that even mean? You think that the National Labor Relations Board was cheating on behalf of the workers? This is just, again, they're just throwing shit at the wall to see if anything sticks. But they continue saying, according to Bloomberg law analysis from last year, it takes longer than a year on average for new unions and employers to sign their first collective bargaining agreement, and many unions, due to bad faith negotiating by employers and other factors, never succeed in securing their first contract. So again, hopefully it would give them a little bit more, bargaining chips at the table in getting this first negotiating contract going. If this does spread like wildfire across the country, and then Amazon just can't focus all of their efforts on this one facility, and then you start to spread them thin, and you start organizing these other warehouses around the world, and that could help apply some pressure on Amazon, which is again exactly what we saw with the Starbucks unionization efforts. So again, credit 100% to Chris Smalls, all of the other workers, all of the other organizers who put in the time, showed up every single day, and were out there trying to make this shit happen. They made it happen, and this is an absolute titanic shift in the American labor movement, and you love to see it.